Welcome everyone. We're Group 6 and we're here to present our capstone project, Cold Caller. This project aims to transform the way political campaigns connect with voters through the process of cold calling. Let's start off with some background and motivation behind this project. Our client for this project is Mr. Bob Brinson Jr. He's a North Carolina State Senate candidate. And as a part of Mr. Brinson's campaign strategy, elderly voters are enlisted to cold call voters within the district to survey them on various political issues. These volunteers use large Excel spreadsheets that contain tens of thousands of voters, from which each volunteer is assigned 500 names to contact. The current method involves these volunteers noting the responses down with pencil and paper and then submitting them to a volunteer coordinator. The coordinator's job is then to manually consolidate these results for further analysis. Now let's talk about the specific problems we observe with the current system. Identifying them was crucial in developing our solution. Handling voter lists. The use of an extensive Excel spreadsheet to manage voter information is cumbersome. The assignment of large lists of 500 voters per volunteer results in inconsistent engagement rates among them, with some volunteers not making the effort to make any calls. The uneven distribution leads to missed opportunities in voter outreach. Data management challenges. The analog method of recording survey results on paper is inefficient, and the reliance on pencil and paper not only contributes to environmental waste, but also poses readability challenges for the elderly volunteers. Coordinator overhead was also a problem here. The manual process of collecting data from other volunteers and consolidating the results is slow and prone to errors. Now I'll pass it off to Ashta for the project goals and the proposed solutions.
Okay, so now I'll talk about the project goals. So one of the main goals for us was to just digitize the entire process. We wanted to remove any paper, any other systems or methods of doing the survey process. We wanted the management of the volunteers, the actual surveying, the data collection, all to be on this one system. And we also wanted to standardize it, so make everyone use the system, and so we wanted to make it easy. We also wanted to have the goal of just consolidating all of the survey results in this one place and analyzing the data results into visuals like graphs and bar charts and pie graphs, just so that it's not a bunch of numbers, but the admins and Mr. Brinson, they can see the different results of the different questions and more interesting stuff like which counties, which districts chose certain things over others, things of that nature. Next, we wanted a space to just manage the volunteers digitally on one place, let the admins remove volunteers, let the admins reset their passwords, see their progress. That leads into the next point, like seeing volunteer progress when they completed their last surveys, how many surveys they've completed, and all of that. Just having this all in one place was like our primary goal. Next, I'll be talking about target users. So we basically have two different types of main users, volunteer users and admin users. And so the volunteer users, they're just simply the people who volunteer their time to do the surveys, to call people, to cold call them and survey them. So they're using one side of our system, and then the other side of our system is for the admin users, and that consists of kind of three different types of people, which is the candidate, the sole candidate, which is Mr. Brinson, and then the volunteer coordinator who kind of manages all the volunteers, will create accounts, will remove accounts, check their progress, things of that nature. And then the poll coordinator who will kind of look at the data visualizations and the data analytics and kind of convey that to Mr. Brinson. And then now I'll talk about the system features. So first I'll go over the main functions. We wanted to definitely have a login functionality so that not just anyone can access the website and input survey results. We wanted each volunteer to have their own account and each admin to have their own account, and also split up the different types of things that they can do. So volunteers only have access to certain pages and admins only have access to their admin pages. Next is the voter list functionality. So whenever a volunteer logs in, they go straight to the voter list page. They see all their voters and their respective surveying buttons. And so the voter list, once they complete the survey, it kind of dwindles down. And once they've completed all of their 10 voters, they get a little pop-up. And then they can request more voters to survey. And then there's the initial call page, which is when the survey button is clicked. It is the initial page that it takes you to with a little script that says like, hello, my name's Asta. Like, do you mind if I take some time to survey you about Mr. Brinson? He's a North Carolina State Senate candidate. Just want to ask you a few questions. And then we put in the result of whether they picked up, if they didn't pick up, and then if they accepted the survey or if they didn't accept the survey. That's one of the main functionalities of the surveying page. And then also the different survey question pages. It's pretty simple, self-explanatory. That's just where the volunteer inputs the answers to the questions that the voters respond to. And then we have these 3 admin features, which is account creation, volunteer progress, and data analytics. And that is where just account creation, volunteer can create an admin account or a volunteer account, and all they have to input is a first name, last name, email, which is their username, and a password, and the type of user they are, which would be volunteer or admin. Next, we have the volunteer progress page. It's just a table of all the volunteers. You can delete volunteers there. You can reset their passwords. Like the admin can reset passwords for volunteers there. They can also see how many surveys each volunteer has done and when their last, the date of their last completed survey. And they can also query for different volunteers and also sort them by ascending and descending based on each of the attributes of that table. And then we have the data analytics page, which simply has all the questions and the analytics of how many people voted for option A or option B. And also we have some features to like see the responses based on certain locations and stuff like that. And we also have a page where I'll mention this in the unique features later, but a place where you can download flagged voters, which I'll go into a little bit later. So some of the unique features we have is like all the data analytics features, they're embedded into our system. You don't have to go to like a third-party website to like input all your numbers and things like that. Like automatically just the data analytics will show up because we have that page. Next we have like the account management, where you can like the admin can reset the password and look at the different volunteers and delete them, manage them, create them. Another unique feature we have is that this whole system is customized to Mr. Brinson's needs. We've been very in touch with him, and he's been relaying different things that he thinks are important that he would like in his website. And one of those things he's mentioned is that it should be extremely like user friendly because the primary volunteer demographic tends to be older people. So we aim to make it very easy navigation, very easy usage, high contrast, large fonts, things like that. And then we have a feature to download flagged voters. So in the cases where someone's on the initial call page and someone does not pick up, or someone leaves a voicemail, things like that, or they say they don't want to be contacted, those voters will then be flagged and put into their own CSV file. And then the admins can download that list of flagged voters, and then they can just do whatever they want, like remove them, keep them, whatever they would like. And then finally, we have a feature for like updating survey questions so that the system can be reused for different elections, and they can have new questions because they might change over time.
We built our system using a combination of React for the front end, MySQL as our database, and Python for our backend. We use SQL Alchemy and Flask for the API connection to the database because the SQL Alchemy ORM and Flask web framework made working on the database interactions more simple and intuitive. We chose MySQL because we wanted a relational database, knowing that a lot of the tables would be interconnected, especially the most important tables, the volunteers and the voters. We chose to use Docker because we knew that later we would need to deploy, and Docker would make the deployment process easier when we got to it. It was also helpful because it started our database, ran our backend, and ran our front end all together at the right times, with just one command. And for development, we all use VS Code as our main IDE. This made the most sense due to us having a React front end and a Python backend, as well as having containerization. Because VS Code has a lot of extensions that made development with these tools and languages easier. We all felt like our project went pretty smoothly, and fortunately, we didn't run into anything too difficult for us to resolve. We did feel like we had a slow start to the project, and in the first week or so when we began the project, we weren't getting as much done. However, when we got into a good routine, we were able to work efficiently. There were a few issues that slowed us down a few times. The containerization process took us some time to get working, and because of that, we ended up having two separate backends because of the assignment of the different tasks across the group. Some more work was done than needed because of the initial difficulties with Docker. It also caused some confusion multiple times when changes to the requirements.txt or package.json were made and the Docker images were cached and weren't updating these changes unless we ran a command to fix that. This was confusing for most of our team since many of us weren't super familiar with Docker. And then another difficulty was creating the schema for our database. Although most of the tables we needed were very straightforward, figuring out how to systematically store the surveys and survey questions was a hassle and it was complex. It had to be stored in an odd format to get things to work and make sense. And then this also led to another difficulty. Because the data had to be stored in a weird way in the database, it was also difficult to connect the back end of the survey responses and questions with the front end. The way the data needed to be parsed was weird and confusing, and this part of the integration process went a bit slower.
Looking back at the lessons learned and our reflection of this project as a whole, we found that good communication helped enforce team collaboration and our mutual understanding of the project. I can confidently say that none of us were afraid to message in the group chat or to get on a Zoom call when we needed help or clarification. Everyone was really quick to respond and help out when needed, which made the entire process a lot easier and less intimidating. Moving on to user stories, in the first sprint, our user stories were super vague and they didn't distinguish exactly what needed to get done. Even in the second sprint, we had a hard time figuring out every single task. And so things that needed to get done would be left unnoticed. And it gave us more work that was pushed to the next sprint. It wasn't really till the third sprint that we got the hang of creating nearly all the user stories we needed. And then moving on, after beginning work on our project, we ran into situations where one of us was more inclined to work on a user story that wasn't assigned to us. And this would happen sometimes either because we already had experience with that portion of the project and like we could do it faster, or sometimes it was just something we had to implement in order to complete our assigned story. And so in cases like this, we would just pick up a story assigned to someone else and let them know that we did that part. And for us specifically, this wasn't a problem because the designated tasks all seemed to even out in the end. And we had great communication about it, and everyone ended up getting experience with all aspects of the project. And then next, our group had regular meetings, like at least once a week, usually for about an hour or so, just to figure out the things we had finished already and what we still had to do. And this helped us maintain accountability and made it easier to keep up with any responsibilities regarding the class. Next, our group met a few times with our client, Mr. Brinson, and this was just really helpful for our understanding of his project objectives. And we were able to make sure that our deliverable met his needs and ensure that the project wasn't only meeting the current requirements, but able to be adaptable in the future. And then lastly, we found it super helpful to have someone take notes whenever we had a meeting. Sometimes like one of us couldn't make it to the meeting, or other times a couple of days would go by and we would just forget what was talked about. And having the notes to look back, detailing what we need to get done, was super helpful.
All right, I'm Greg Brinson. I'll be running us through the Cold Caller website that we've developed and the demo of it. So first, the first screen you have access to is the login page. All you're able to do is log in. So here we're going to log in with the pre-made volunteer account. And we have the username or the email as username and the regular password. As soon as you log in, you're routed to the voter list page. This is where the volunteer has access to all the voters assigned to them. In this situation, we just have one left of the original 10. So we're going to go ahead and click Start Survey. Here we're given the phone number to call, the name of the person, and then a brief little script on what to say is if they pick up. And we have the option, if they accept the survey, they say, I would like to fill out a survey, or if they would not like to, decline survey. Or if they didn't pick up the phone, we can say we left a voicemail, or if it was a wrong phone number or disconnected phone number, it'll flag them in the database for cleaning up on the next cycle. And so now we're going to assume that they accepted the survey, and we're going to go ahead and hit continue. So here now we're starting the actual survey questions, and we have the first prompt. We ask them, who would they vote for? Select their response, hit next. Here we have another question. This pulls from a pool of 3 different questions, and the volunteers just shown one of those 3. And from this, you choose the voter's response, hit next. And then the final one, Bob or opponent. And then you're given a little outro to make sure you thank them for their time, and etc. And on this page, you can also go back through these questions. The answers are saved, and you can fix anything if you make a mistake. Once you're done with the survey, you hit submit. And then since this is the 10th survey completed for the voter, there's some balloons that pop up, and then you just hit continue, and it brings you back to your voter list page. So this voter's completed their first set of 10 voters, and now I can click get more voters to get another set of 10. And so you see this is filled up with 10 more voters. So as a volunteer, you only have access to this page. I click home, it takes me to this page, and this is all you have access to, as well as the change password page. If you would like to change your password, you are able to do so. And so now we're going to switch over to an admin account. I've already got one made. Go ahead and log in, and you're automatically routed to the admin page where you can see there's a new admin side nav bar. And the first default page is the data analytics. So the questions that we were filling out earlier are shown here. First, we have question number 1, all the responses saved in the database at this moment. And we can filter by location of the actual voters. So each voter's within a certain county or district, and we can click on one of these to filter by it specifically. So here's question 1 with the data responses. Question 2, like I said, there's 3 separate questions that they could be asked. Right now, we're just filled up question 3 with data. And then question 3, we have same thing. And then as you can see, the total survey submitted saved up here in the top right. Next page we have is the volunteer progress page. So this has the list of all volunteers that have been created in the system. So here we've got 4 volunteers created, silver being the one that I just did that one survey on. And we can sort them by alphabetical, the amount of voters they've called, or the last call date, the most frequent call that has been made. You can see this is 1040, and right now it is 1040. And on this page, you can select one and delete or reset their password as volunteer or as an admin to manage those accounts. The next page we have access to is the account creation page. It requires you to fill in all the parts of the form to make an account. So first name, let's do first, last name, we'll do last, email, test@gmail.com, password 1234567 and this will be a volunteer. But we can also choose an admin if we want to make additional admin accounts. Let's say create. All right, account successfully created. If we go back to volunteer progress, we can see that this person has been created an account. And from here, like I said, we can go ahead and delete, and that'll be reflected in the page over here. And then admin has access to admin page, change password, and log out as a hamburger menu. And they can also log out via this button as well. And that navigates you back to the login page. Admins do not have access to the voter list page, and that's just because they're not in the database the same way. They don't have a list of voters that they can call. So if an admin wishes to make survey calls, they have to make a volunteer count for themselves. And that's our website. Thank you so much for your time.
Now I'll be talking about some of my contributions. So towards the beginning, I really focused on the UI and then the UX using Figma, and I created basically like all the wireframes for the different pages, and that's what our UI is totally based on. And then I worked on the voter list front end to show like all the different voters and the start survey button. And then I worked on the password change, and we have two different sides to that. So there's a volunteer side where the volunteer can reset their password if they like know their current password. But if they've forgotten their password, then they have to ask the admin to do that. And then so the admin does that through the volunteer progress page, and they select the volunteer that needs their password changed, and they change it from there. And then also worked on the account creation, front end and back end. And then I worked on the phone number presentation. So the data has like landline and cell phone numbers. And so what I worked on was like prioritizing the cell phone number, and then if they have both numbers, but if they don't, then just putting the landline number, and also replacing a certain area that used to have the phone number with their party affiliation and gender. And then I just worked on a bunch of smaller stuff too, as well, like styling stuff, logos, things like that, and just like little fixes here and there. So, yep, that is what I've done this semester. And yep.
So some of the major contributions I made to this project were, one, the call response pop-up page, which just asks the volunteer whether the voter accepted or declined the survey, or if they didn't answer, or if it was a wrong number. And then I also worked on the admin volunteer list page, which just shows up in the admin view. It shows a list of volunteers and their name, how many people they've called, and the date that they last called someone. And then I worked on the admin data page, which just shows visualizations of all of the survey responses, as well as the back end of this page, which grabbed the data from the database and showed it in the visualizations and the bar graphs. And then I also worked a little bit on the header and the footer in the beginning, and the volunteer and admin drop-down menus.
Coming to my contributions, I mainly worked on the survey part of Codecaller. That includes the front end for the volunteer survey page, back end for serving those questions and storing the responses. I also worked on flagging voters in the initial call page and the manage voter page on the admin side.
My contributions included containerization, so I worked on getting the Docker containers running and having a compose file to run all the containers at the right times. I also did the backend API endpoints that we would be needing when integrating with the backend and the front end. And I also did the implementation of the database schema we came up with. Although Tanya did the parts of this backend stuff concerning the survey responses and questions. I did the backend integration of the admin volunteer list page, which displays all the volunteers and their amounts of surveys and last call date to the admin. Also the integration of the voter list page. So the part where each volunteer has the right list of voters to call shows up. I helped with the admin data page by having a feature to sort survey data based on voter location, and I implemented a way to differentiate the volunteer and administrator users so that different access privileges could be granted. I made a script to add the voter data from the CSV given by Mr. Brinson to the database. I also adapted Greg's initial authentication code to be used with our Python backend, since that code had been done in a JavaScript backend before Dockerization was finished. And then lastly, I added a reward pop-up for a volunteer when completing X amount of surveys of voters. Well, Greg was having some technical difficulties, so he is unable to talk about his contributions, but I will try to do him justice. So Greg spent a lot of time on the UI and implementing it to look like our initial Figmas. He implemented the differentiation of admin and volunteer permission routing, so admin can only access certain pages and volunteers can only access others. He initially created the login functionality and authentication and made the hamburger menu, the navigation menu for the admin page. And he also did the initial survey drop downs selections on the first survey page. Additionally, he worked on assigning voters to a volunteer and being able to get a new set of ex-voters when a volunteer completes their current set. Thank you for listening.